welcome to another TurcatoKim video. Welcome if you are new. My name is Emily, and my husband and I actually make up TurcatoKim. That's why we made the name the way that it is. Basically, for this video today, I am going to be doing a Q&A about celiac disease. As you've probably already noticed from the title, which is a bit dramatic, celiac disease is a disease in which gluten is essentially poison to your insides. I know, very dramatic, but it's true. Basically, when I was tested, the results were that about 15 inches of my small intestine were completely damaged and unable to absorb any nutrients because of gluten. So that's sort of what I'm going to be discussing today. If you have celiac disease or you know somebody that has celiac disease, please show them this Q&A. I would love to see your answers to this Q&A. I want to know what your experience was like. You can upload it to Instagram stories, YouTube, or Facebook, and please tag me in it. All my socials are in the description box below. I really want to know everybody else's stories about this as well. So as I said, it's a Q&A, so it's about 5 questions long, and since that's all I gotta say, let's get started. First question is, what were your symptoms and for how long did you experience these symptoms for? Oh, and also don't mind the lighting. It is sunset. And I'm trying not to be flushed out by the light. I really didn't want to use, I wanted to use natural light. So I hope that this is okay for everyone. Basically, my symptoms was everything that you could possibly find on WebMD. So, for instance, I had really bad fatigue. I was tired and exhausted all the time. And because I was tired and exhausted all the time, I also had really bad mood swings. I had a lot of depression. Headaches were a big one. Loss of appetite because my stomach was always sore. As well, my entire abdomen was hard and bloated. So it's almost like I had a tortoise shell sort of over my stomach. It was always hard, and if you pressed on it, it was really painful. And when I say that it was bloated, I'm quite a small girl. I don't know if you can tell from this angle, but my stomach was bloated to the point where I couldn't even see my toes. So I looked quite pregnant. And just trying to think, oh, I also had weight loss. So if you have celiac disease, your intestines are damaged to the point where you're not absorbing nutrients, and that includes fats. So I would be pooping out all my fats. So that's so embarrassing. But yes, I was severely underweight. And then on top of that, a lot of your good bacteria or immune system fighters, people, they're actually located in your gut. So when your gut isn't healthy, you most definitely have trouble staying healthy. So I was always getting sick. I always got the flu. I always got a cold. I just never seemed to be able to get better. So those were sort of my symptoms. It's a long list, unfortunately. And for how long? Well, I really started noticing them, like the symptoms, around 2014. I'd always been tired because I'm anemic. And then as it turned, and I also had asthma. So I always had a little bit of fatigue, but it was just, I distinctly remember it getting worse around 2014. And the reason why I say that year in particular is because that's when my GI symptoms really spiked and became something that no person should ever have to get used to. The reason being is, or the big memory behind 2014 is my friends all wanted to go to Las Vegas together. And I was one of those people that had said, oh, we need to go to Las Vegas. We always say we're going to go, and then we never go. And at that point in my life, they were going. That we'd finally kind of organized it. And then all of a sudden I was having these issues, and I was just too embarrassed to even be able to share a hotel room with somebody because there was the gas and the diarrhea, and it was mortifying. Like, I couldn't bear to travel with friends. So that is what makes 2014 stand out to me. I know that it's 2018, but just hear me out. It took from 2014 to 2016 for me to actually go to a doctor. So my symptoms lasted for about 2 years before I figured out that it was something more than just diet and exercise that needed to be fixed. Because originally that's what I thought it was. I thought, oh, I need to eat healthier, or I need to exercise more, and then all this will go away. So that's originally why my symptoms lasted 2 years before I went to see a doctor. Question number 2 is what did you say to your doctor to get tested? So as I said, I waited 2 years and I tried to cure myself with diet and exercise. And at that point, at the 2-year mark, I was pretty well feeling like I was going crazy. And I essentially said to my doctor, please just cut me open. I know that there's something wrong with me. I know I'm not feeling normal. Like, for a how old was I? 25-year-old woman, I shouldn't be this tired. I shouldn't be this sick. I shouldn't be this weak. Like, I was so upset, and I was demanding invasive surgery, basically. And I was crying. I was crying in her office. And I just said, like, this is not normal. I've tried diet and exercise, because I thought originally that I had irritable bowel syndrome. And so, like, she had sent me to dietitians, and, like, we were really trying to figure it out. And then at this point, like I said, I'm sitting crying in her room, and she goes, okay, slow down, like, we're not going to cut you open. And she just said, we're going to do a blood panel. Like, we're going to just, every blood test in the book, we're going to do it on you. We're going to figure out, is it your thyroid? Could it be celiac disease? And that was the first time I had heard that being an option of what I was going through. So we sort of went through all these things that it could be, including liver, kidneys, like, you name it. I was going to get the tests done. I also had an ultrasound done as well. So lots of tests. And every single test that I went and did, they came back negative except for one, which was the celiac blood test. So the celiac blood test actually came back as positive. And most people would say, oh, well, then you have celiac disease. But I guess the blood test isn't very reliable, because essentially what they're testing for is a lack of nutrients in the blood, as well as a high level of those antibodies that you sort of produce when you're sick. So I had those two sort of key markers for celiac, and so then the next thing is to get tested with an endoscopy, which leads me to question number 3. What is the celiac test? So, like I said, there's the blood test to sort of see if you need to book yourself in for an endoscopy. The wait list is about 6 months in Calgary before you can get in to see anybody. And the celiac test is actually quite frustrating because, and I'll tell you why, it's actually called the gluten challenge. So the gluten challenge is when you are made to eat 1 serving of gluten every day for 3 days. And I know there's probably a lot of you out there watching this thinking, okay, like, that's it. But when it does to your body what it does to my body and everybody else, like, you will understand why I'm calling it poison. So gluten is essentially any ingredients or any sort of food product that is made with the ingredients wheat, barley, or rye. And there's a lot that are made with that. Like, it's in everything, surprisingly, even toothpaste. And so essentially what you're supposed to do during this gluten challenge is eat it and poison yourself. So I recently went to a course on celiac, and there was one girl who said, oh, should I stop eating gluten and then start eating once I get my endoscopy time? And that's what I had asked as well. And everybody said, yeah, there's no reason to torture yourself any further. Like, you shouldn't have to be tired and in pain all the time. Just stop eating gluten. And then when the test time comes, eat it again. So I stopped eating it for the 6 months while I'm waiting for this exam. And then in December, so I got my blood test May 2017. December was supposed to start the gluten challenge and ended up in the emerge. So I had to get lung x-rays, ECGs, so like tests on my heart rate. And then because the nurse was so befuddled by how huge my stomach was, I had to do multiple pregnancy tests. And even my husband was sitting there looking at my stomach like it's the first time he's ever seen it. And he just thought, are you pregnant? So it was a frightening experience. All of a sudden, I couldn't handle eating gluten. Whereas I had been doing it for 2 years previous, and I had been managing to go to the gym and work a full-time job and be able to do all these things on gluten. Whereas after I stopped eating it and I detoxified my body of it, once I reintroduced it to my body started to shut down. The reason why I ended up getting a lung and chest tests in emergency was because I felt like somebody was squeezing on my torso and I couldn't breathe. My bones hurt. I couldn't stand up straight. I felt like I had to, it was crazy and it was awful. And the emerge doctor was like, please stop eating gluten. Stopped eating gluten. Ended up being told by the nurse at the Foothills Hospital that I was disqualified somehow from taking the celiac test because I'd stopped eating gluten on doctor's orders. So I kind of bypassed her after, and I went back to a gastroenterologist, so that's a tummy specialist basically, and he said that he would have tested me despite me only being able to eat gluten for 4 days. So that's how long I lasted. Wait, no. I lasted 8 days. So I had 8 servings of gluten before I ended up in hospital. So that was that. And so when I met with with the gastroenterologist a second time, he basically said, with you, we're going to do a modified gluten test or gluten challenge because we basically know that it's celiac disease. We just need to make sure. So I then was given a modified test. So instead of 3 weeks, I had to eat gluten for 2 weeks. And I was only supposed to eat it as often as I felt I could handle it. So for me, that involved eating McDonald's and then being sick for 3 days. And then eating sushi and then being sick for 3 days. So I almost ate gluten every 3rd day. And it was awful. I think one of those days I ended up sleeping for 17 hours and I only woke up to eat. And at that point I was drinking chicken broth. It was all I could handle. The first time I had stopped eating gluten, I had developed acid reflux to the point where I needed prescription medicine to stop the acid reflux because gluten hurts my stomach so much that I lose my appetite and I stop eating. So then my stomach overproduces acid and starts like hurting itself, if that makes sense. So anyways, so the second time around I was able to manage the challenge because I was able to do it my way. And at the endoscopy, it's basically where they stick a camera and a tube down your throat with like a little light on it. So they go all the way down your throat, all the way down to your intestines, and once they get down there, I think the tube has like little scissors and snips on it, and they take some of your tissue from your small intestine, specifically the duodenum, and they take it back up out your throat, and they basically test it for celiac disease. And so right before they put me under, because you can do this while you're awake, but I asked to be sedated because that just sounded unpleasant to be awake for. They basically said before I was sedated, you will not find out for 2 weeks whether you have celiac disease or not. Okay, fine. Like, I've waited almost a year now. What's another 2 weeks? And then as I'm waking up from the sedation, about 20 minutes later, it's not a long test. The nurse is saying, you tested positive. Like, they could see literally from the camera, that little micro camera that they put. Sorry, it's distracting. They could see from that little micro camera, like, that it was so visible. They said the entire duodenum, so that's 15 inches long, of my intestines was completely damaged. So what they're looking for is inside your small intestine, there's these little hair guys that are kind of floating around, and when you eat food and they go through your stomach and your digestive system, that food, all the nutrients from that food, when they finally get to your small intestine, these little villi is what they're called, they kind of snatch them up, they go through the villi into your bloodstream, and then you get nutrients and fat from your food. And essentially, this is what it's supposed to look like. I don't know if that even makes sense to you guys. They're like floating. Anyways, mine looked like this. Like, there was nothing there. It was all dead. So that was sort of the thing where they were instantly able to diagnose me, because like almost my entire small intestine was damaged. It's all gone. So they said that it'll probably take me about 2 years to heal that sucker. So, that's great and everything. And so question number 4 is, when was I diagnosed? So I was diagnosed April 11th, 2018. So basically from the start of my symptoms till now, it's been 4 years. So it does take quite a while to diagnose celiac disease. So if you are feeling any of these symptoms at all, I would just go ahead and try and get the blood test, or even try to go and see a GI specialist, because honestly, like, the reason why I say don't wait is because when you have celiac disease, you're not just damaging your small intestine, you're damaging your liver. You're more at risk for cancer. And they say that, like, I went to a celiac course, and they say that once your risk of cancer is elevated, it never goes back down. So in some sense, I hate that you have to do the gluten challenge, because it continues to increase your risk for cancer. So that's frustrating. I wish they would find a different way to test us. So increased risk for cancer, increased risk for liver disease, increased risk for Crohn's disease, increased risk, what else? Oh, well, anemia or any sort of other autoimmune diseases. So I definitely have asthma, and I am going to be on Pulmicort, which is an inhaler, twice a day for the rest of my life. Oh, and it affects fertility. So if you are planning on having children, you would want to know earlier, like sooner rather than later, if you have celiac disease. Because basically the idea is, if you can't even get nutrients into your own bloodstream, what are the chances that baby is going to be getting nutrients from you and growing and being healthy? Luckily, I'm young enough to be able to heal my gut and not be so worried about my biological clock or anything along those lines. So that's something to think about in terms of celiac and what it can do to your body. So that's why I'm saying get diagnosed as soon as possible. If you're feeling gross after eating gluten, like, that is just a sign to go get tested. You also just can't be afraid of the gluten-free lifestyle, which is what brings me to question number 5, the very last question, which is it easy to stay gluten-free? And the answer is yes. Basically, you notice a huge, colossal difference in your mentality, in your ability to be more physical. Like, I've been going to the gym way more often. I've been feeling stronger. I also feel emotionally way better, way more positive. I feel more like my childhood self, if that makes sense. I felt, because as a child, I was like the happiest kid on the planet. And then you know, as I got older and older, like obviously puberty and other things like that, but I mean, in university, when I was finally finishing my second degree and I was going to the workforce, I just felt like, you know, I should be happier than I am and more excited and more like, woohoo. But instead, I felt like I was a 50-year-old. I was ready to retire by the end of university. So, anyways, when you feel a certain way and then all of a sudden it's like the world opens up and becomes like a brand new, beautiful place to you, it is so easy to maintain being gluten-free. My brother-in-law jokes, I say, oh, like if you had to be gluten-free, what would you miss the most? And he says, oh, it's just not a life worth living. And I've had people joke and say, at a restaurant, when I order gluten-free, they say, oh, extra gluten for me, please, or whatever. And it's fine. I know that it's a joke. But in all honesty, my husband can eat anything in front of me. McDonald's, Subway, pizza, any of that junk food that I really can't get my hands on anymore. Any fast food. Because that's the thing, is fast food is really essentially what I cannot have anymore, ever again. And my husband can eat it in front of me and I don't feel anything. There's no pang of jealousy. There's no pang of sorrow or self-pity. It's just, I know that I will feel better if I don't eat it. And so I don't. And when I look at it as poison, which is part of the title of this video, then you can see why it's so easy to be like, I'm not putting that anywhere near my mouth. I'm not ingesting that. That is poison to me. And instantly, it's so easy to do. As well, it's also easy just because there's so many freaking products out there now. There's cookies and chips and ice cream and pizza, and there's just anything. Like, you name it, you can get it almost, except for donaires and dumplings. So, like, whoever's out there and watching this video, somebody please work on that, because we need donaires and dumplings in our lives. Otherwise, though, you can basically make everything from scratch at home. You just have to become more used to meal prepping and cooking. And then even on the nights where you don't feel like cooking, there's, you know, products like Pinty's chicken strips, where you just heat them up in the oven, maybe have it with rice or some potatoes or fries or something, and you're done. And it's completely easy. You can live a gluten-free life, no problem, and you won't have any cravings. If you have savory cravings, get a bag of chips. If you have sweet cravings, get some cookies or ice cream. Like, you still can eat anything you want on the gluten-free diet. There's just things that you were used to eating before that you have to eliminate. And it really is all about mindset. Like I said, you just have to say, you know what, this isn't good for me. It will destroy my body. It might cause more harm in the long run in terms of harsher diseases, that I'd rather just stay away from it. Like, especially knowing, like, oh my gosh, I'm increasing my risk for cancer if I eat this. What? Like, why would you eat it then? So that's something that I just wanted to get out there. I feel like the gluten-free diet definitely ruins it for people with celiac disease, because, like I said, we could genuinely get hurt or harmed from restaurants that claim to be gluten-free and then aren't. So, or just aren't careful. I personally have a bit of a beef with restaurants that say that they are gluten-friendly, but then still prepare all their food in the same space. Like, there's almost no concept of cross-contamination in restaurants, which is something that really gets under my skin, grinds my gears. And but recently, the Canadian Celiac Association is starting to go to restaurants and determine whether they meet the Celiac Association's needs or policies to be considered gluten-free. So currently there is only one restaurant in all of Alberta. So I live in Alberta, Canada. And there's only one restaurant in all of Alberta. It's 3 hours away from me, and it's called My Fries. And it is stamped with the Canadian Celiac Association's seal of approval. I guess that they were on the news and they were saying, oh, people come in and they cry because they don't have to worry And it genuinely is such an issue going to restaurants, because you have to be suspicious and you have to be rude, and it's just an unpleasant experience all around. It's unpleasant for the wait staff, it's unpleasant for you, it's unpleasant for the chefs, I'm sure. So anyways, that was a bit of a rant. But yes, it's easy to be gluten-free. So I hope I've answered that question. It's easy to be gluten-free in your own home as long as you're making all your own food. It's a little bit harder it's a little bit trickier when you go to restaurants, and so I figured that I will do a how to be gluten-free in restaurants video, and I will share with you some of my favorite restaurants in the city of Calgary that you can try to see just how good gluten-free food can be. Alright, so that is it for today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you found it informative. Like I said at the beginning of this video, if you have any social media at all, I would love to see your answers to those questions, especially if you have celiac disease yourself. If anything in this video surprised or shocked you, I'd love to see comments on that. I would love to start a conversation. As I said, I'm trying to build a community here, and I would love for there to just be more education around this obvious need. So anyways, I hope that you're having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next TurcatoKim video. Bye!
Baby, I'ma hold you